What's up? Ghost Fictions is here, and we're back again. This is the first part of a story where Issei was neglected and left. After an unfortunate event that led to Issei and Vali becoming guildmates of the Chaotic Fairy Tale Guild, and after 2 months in their world, the Dragon Emperors are back and stronger than ever. Still, unfortunately, upon their return, an old threat from the old generation of Edenland approaches their world, but the question is, will they be ready to face them? But before we start, please consider subscribe to the channel and give this video a like. Don't forget to check the description for more informations. Now, let's get into part 1. Just 2 months ago, Riaz and her team last saw Issei Haidu before he left the school to train and prepare himself for the battle with Sairag Bale. Azazel informed them that Issei had asked for the 3 months off so he could focus on his training, while Ravel Phoenix seemed to be passive, as if she wasn't affected by the news. Still, she seemed confident that Issei would return from the 3 months of training alone without any of them. If only I could take back what I said to him when I let my jealousy get the better of me, Riaz said as she recalled the day that she made a terrible mistake because of a stupid thing like her name, all because she was a silly greedy woman who didn't deserve Issei Haidu for all he did for her. Flashback. 2 months ago. Butchu, where are you going? Ice, will you protect me? Of course, I will protect Butchu. And Asia? Bay? Yes, I will also protect Asia. And Akeno? Akeno-san? That is obvious. But why are you suddenly asking me such a thing? Hey Ice. Why yes. Do you, what am I? Who am I? To me Butchu is Butchu and Yubaka. Riaz Onasama. Ai-san. You are horrible. It's too much. Why can't you understand Onasama's feelings? Saying that Asia goes after Butchu, and after that, many other words follow as they all begin to regret what they said to the boy that day, but when they want to make amends with their friend. They vanished into thin air only to be informed that Azazel knew of this as well as Rosweiss. Despite what Azazel-sama's words seemed to imply, Ai-sama did not run away or go astray. He filed for a leave of absence from school, as well as informing his clients that he will be unavailable for the next 3 months due to taking a training trip to prepare for the upcoming raiding game. Spoke Ravel eloquently. Her words had a desired effect as the tension immediately left the room and an overwhelming sense of relief filled the hearts of everyone present. Due to a certain fallen angel governor, almost everyone crouched in a corner and pouted petulantly like a child. Despite being a well-bred Oju-sama, Ravel couldn't stop herself from rolling her eyes at the overgrown man-child. Said man-child decided it was finally time to speak up. Yeah, Issei came to me earlier today. He asked me to help him by filing a leave of absence at school. He'll still get the work done. He said he'd have his familiar his them up at the end of each day. He also wanted me to find him a secluded space to train in without disturbance, so I hooked him up with one through the help of my connections, because I'm cool like that. He finished with a calm smirk on his face while striking a pose. Riaz, well relieved that her beloved pawn didn't stray, couldn't stop herself from almost snarling at Azazel. How dare he? Issei is her pawn. She should have been notified immediately. At the very least, he should have requested permission. Didn't he trust her enough to speak to her about this? She immediately stopped her thought as she recalled the affairs between her and Ice. Did he feel that he needed to get away from her? She felt her heart break at the thought. She loves Ice more than anything, but with the way things were and the things that were said, their potential relationship seems to be even further away from her. She cursed herself for being rash and petulant in her reactions to him and trying to pressure him into confessing. She felt a deep pang of regret for one of the first times in her life. While these issues were important in her mind, she needed to get back to the crux and find out why Azazel thought allowing her pawn to leave without consulting her was a good idea. And why, Azazel, did you think allowing Ice to leave without my permission was a good idea? Questioned Riaz in a frigid tone, accompanied by an equally cold gaze. She was backed up by Akeno, who glared at the fallen angel governor. The others, relieved that their friend was okay, were also highly curious about what was happening. They hoped to find Issei and apologize for how they treated him. But they will have to wait a little longer. They only hoped it wasn't too late and their relationship with him wasn't fractured beyond repair. In response to Ria's question, the perpetually upbeat archangel narrowed his eyes and adopted an expressionless mask on his face that greatly unnerved the members of the org. They'd never been on the receiving end of the governor's ire before, and due to the usual dynamic between him and Issei, it was easy to forget that the man in front of them was one of the most dangerous. Ravel quirked an elegant eyebrow at the drastic change in character for the governor, secretly impressed with his approach. Riaz would never admit it out loud, but she was terrified. She tried hard not to let the quiver in her knees show. You make it sound like Issei is a prisoner here, Riaz. That he has no free will of his own, is that the case? Asked Azazel with a steely tone. He was giving off an oppressive aura to those around him, making them sweat. Riaz faltered in indignant anger at the situation and widened her eyes at the question. How could he say such a thing? Is that why Ice left without telling her? Because he felt she wouldn't let him go otherwise? Of course not, Azazel. Riaz spluttered. I was just concerned about him, and as his king, I don't want anything happening to him, she added. It was the truth to some extent. She knew how close Issei and Azazel were and wasn't too keen to tell him about earlier today's altercation. She knew it would not end well for her, at least. Azazel stared at her with a scrutinizing expression that made her feel like an ant under a magnifying glass. She felt her entire soul was being laid bare before this man, and she didn't like this feeling. After a few seconds that felt like a lifetime to her, he finally broke out into his usual goofy laugh, and Riaz and the orc released the breath they didn't realize they were holding at having his ire directed away from them. You don't have to worry about Issei. He's strong enough to care for himself. You realize he surpassed you and everyone in your peerage long ago. He also spent a month on a secluded mountain being harassed by a dragon king, so he's used to this situation. He's on the verge of evolving in terms of his power. His aura feels more focused and driven. He's going to the next level, and I'm not sure if Saraerd Bale will be ready for the unstoppable force of nature that will run straight into him at the raiding game, said Azazel with a smirk on his face. The others were bewildered by the word of the fallen angel. To pay such high praise to someone is no laughing matter. I suggest you use this time to properly hone your skills to at least keep up with Saraerd and his peerage and Issei, stated Azazel as he made to leave the Haidu residence, leaving behind a deeply troubled orc. Then flashback. I am like Raynor, Riaz said to herself as Asia walked over to her and reassured her. No, you are not Riaz. We've all said things we regret that day and swore that when Issei returned, we would make it up to him. I know he's still out there and getting stronger now. I hate myself since I don't deserve his love after I scolded him as if he was the villain. Asia said as she regretted what she said to Issei, since she couldn't believe that she said such hurtful things to the man who saved her life countless times from trouble because she was weak, but also the many things that Issei had done for her ever since he welcomed her in his life. Issei was more than just a friend to the former nun. He was the light of her life and guardian angel, but now he was gone. She felt so empty that a part of her soul was missing because she was selfish. How could she have betrayed the one who had been the one to give her everything she had ever wanted, even some things that Asia didn't even know she did? Sure, Riaz was the one to reincarnate her, but Asia understood that it would have never happened had it not been for Issei's stubbornness and unquenchable desire to save her. He befriended her and gave her the life he thought she deserved. If that wasn't enough, he had given up the majority of his lifespan to exact vengeance on her behalf when he believed that Shalba Beelzebub had killed her. Therefore, it was no surprise that she fell unequivocally in love with him. Thus being by his side was enough for her, or so she said. But as the days went on, she became greedier. Maybe it was the nature of the devil that she now was that affected her, but she wanted more. She wanted more of his love and his attention. She wanted it focused on her. She remembered the day she said those horrible things to him in the club room and felt a searing pain in her heart. She remembered the look of hurt on his face at her words. But it was too late and the damage had been done. Please. Please return to us, Issei. We are the ones who don't deserve you, but I need you. I'm sorry, Issei. For everything. Asia said to herself as she cried on her bed after checking on Riaz and hugged the stuffed mouse she had treasured since she went on that date with Issei. Riaz isn't the one who was like Raynor. I was that one because I hurt his heart even when I saw that pain in his eyes. Asia whispered to herself as she hated herself for being so weak and pathetic that she was some crybaby who needed to be saved all the time. The other members of the Orc, excluding Rossweiss, were also feeling beaten and didn't have the strength to even think about training for the Bale ratings game tomorrow. Kibayudo leaned stiffly against a wall at the edge of the room, keeping his sharp and protective gaze on the rest of the peerage. While deeply saddened at the loss of his brother in arms, Kiba knew that he had to keep it together. He needed to stand firm in the face of this tragedy, to be the pillar of strength for the rest of the peerage in their time of turmoil. He knew that Issei would have wanted it that way. They had promised each other that they would carry out this duty if anything happened to the other. It was a promise he kept close to his heart and one he would fulfill with every fiber of his being. I'll make sure they're safe, brother. Always. Kiba said as he went through more training to keep his skills sharpened. Kaneko sat on one of the Levesiates in the room, staring blankly into space, her face more emotionless than usual. Her eyes, though, couldn't hide the grief that she was feeling. She had finally gotten to understand Ice recently. He wasn't just the shameless pervert that she thought he was. There was more to him, a greater depth to his beliefs that attracted her like a moth to the flame. He had an inner strength and conviction that he used to blow away the years of doubt and fear that she felt of herself and her power. He helped her overcome the trauma of her childhood, along with helping her reconcile with her older sister. Something that she would forever be thankful for. But most importantly, he gave her back the smile she had long since thought she had lost. Being with him brought her newfound happiness and joy, which she would have never thought possible. She was hopeful of pursuing a relationship with him. He made no secret of his desire for a harem, and she had no problems with being part of it, as she knew he would treat her well. She also knew that her master, Riaz, had a claim on the lovable pervert. So it was an unwritten rule amongst them that before they could further pursue their relationships with him, his relationship with Riaz must be solidified, as she would act as the head of the harem. It was frustrating to see that almost no progress was made between them. Ice was as oblivious to his charms as ever, and Riaz was too afraid to make a move. It was causing no small amount of headaches for the rest of them. That was why they were snappy at him on that fateful day in the clubroom. Looking back, she can't help but be ashamed of herself for her behavior. While her frustrations were understandable, it was never any excuse to say something that could be construed as hurtful to someone, especially one as kind and caring as Ice. It was done in the heat of the moment, and she realized soon after that she had stepped over the line. She knew that she would probably regret those actions for a long time. I guess I am a selfish Nico. What kind of person would say those things to the one they love and not even consider what they're going through? I got so used to his smile and gentle aura that I forgot he's probably the one with more weight as our support pillar. Kaneko said as she looked at her chocolate cookies and couldn't taste their sweetness. Nothing was sweet or delicious now that Issei was gone from their home, so she could only hope they could speak to him again and hopefully rebuild what they destroyed. Imajima Akeno was much in the same way as Kaneko. She was sitting on a wooden chair, dead to the world. Her eyes were blank, and she was unresponsive. She spent the time when not training lost in her thoughts. She wondered if it was her fate to lose the people she loved forever. Whether it was to death or, most times, her machinations, she remembered the years of self-loathing she endured. While she would forever be thankful to Riaz for all that she had done for her, Issei held a special place in her heart. Akeno knew that, for all her usual composure and the facade she put up, she had this horrible habit of acting impulsively and making the worst possible decisions. This was evidenced by how she handled her relationship with her father. She could have been comforted in his warmth for all those years, and they could have shared their grief and grown closer over time. But she threw that all away. She could be somewhat forgiven as she was still a young girl. It was expected that she could not deal with the horror she witnessed and blamed the most convenient person possible. Looking back, she wasn't proud of it, but she needed to do something like that, or else she would have broken. As the years passed and she matured, she could have found a healthy way to deal with her emotions and rekindle her relationship with her father, but she bottled it all up. She hung on desperately to the pointless hatred that festered in her heart. But then Issei came along and blew away all that negativity with his kindness and compassion. Even though he was one of the biggest perverts she had ever known, he had a heart bigger than anyone could fathom. He took in all her hatred, self-loathing, and insecurities and shouldered them for her. He gave her warmth and love. He accepted all her flaws and put her on a pedestal that she never deserved. He even repaired the relationship with her father, which had been so badly broken, and had given her back her feeling of belonging. And before she knew it, she had fallen deeply in love with him. When the incident in the clubroom happened, she was so caught up in the heat of the moment that she allowed all the impatience and frustration of Ice and Riaz not being able to advance their relationship so that she could finally have her chance to show. She cut into her beloved Issei with the one thing he couldn't defend himself from. Her words. While seemingly inconsequential to most, they profoundly affected the pawn. Issei's past trauma, his doubts, and his own self-loathing. All those festering wounds were the ones that the salt of her words rubbed into. She could see she had made a mistake from the hurt in his eyes. But it was too late to take back her words. The regret was something that ate at her from that day forward. While he's been gone for those 2 months, it was torture for her, but she would wait every day, hoping she would see him again. Hoping that she could get the chance to say she was sorry, to beg for his forgiveness. I am a disgusting fallen angel like the one who killed him and destroyed his heart. After all, I told him that day, how can he even look at me now? Akeno asked herself as he looked at the wings that Issei once told her to take pride in, but now only regret filled her heart. Fortunately, their chance of asking Issei for forgiveness had just begun as the one they'd been waiting for finally returned. Unknown location. All was quiet in a vast plains field before a massive portal opened as 2 figures began to leave the said portal. And you're sure this is it, Vali? Of course, Issei. Albion confirmed that this is our world. I hope nothing has happened while we've been gone. Vali said as he walked out of the portal in new clothes that seemed similar but different from his old ones. Vali was now sporting clothes that were meant to be used in combat but also for style as well. He was still wearing the same high-collared black leather jacket over his new V-neck shirt while also wearing burgundy jeans with a silver chain drooping down over them and black leather chaps with 3 bands encircling his right calf and black shoes with black buckles. On his ears, he had earrings that seemed to have some orb attached to them, and the armor he was wearing seemed similar to a mecha suit. Vali then turned to see his rival in his new style, and chuckled at how those idiots in the other world had helped his opponent grow a lot in the past year. At first, Vali was curious if Issei could become strong enough to fight the Belair due to the devil's incredible power and training. Still, after the two of them got tangled up with some dimensional hopping issues, thanks to that idiot from the hero faction, it turned out for the better since that world. The enemies they faced were able to help both of them achieve even greater power. However, the one who improved the most was the man he was proud to call his rival. Issei Haidu. Due to his training with many people in that world, Issei had undergone such a drastic change, and Vali didn't mean in appearance, but also the aura around Issei. At first, Issei only looked the part of being a wielder of a dragon due to drag with him. Still, now Issei looked much more muscular than most would remember him being, not to the point where he became bulky and unappealing, but achieving a perfect balance between strength and speed, which was very fitting given Issei's fighting style. Issei also looked taller as he stood at 6 feet 2 inches, and his eyes were a startling shade of emerald green. He was almost all black, with black leather pants flared out at the bottom with black biker boots. Issei also wore a high-collared black cloak, which also bears his draconian markings, along with a few straps wrapped around his right thigh, as well as a maroon belt with 3 straps as well crossing each other diagonally with a snarling dragon head for a belt buckle. His top consisted of a body from a black leather combat vest that cut off at his arms and fitted to his body in a way that clearly showed the definition he worked hard to receive from his training, and his hands were covered in plain black leather gloves. While his right arm was the regular, slightly tanned color of his skin, his left was covered to his wrist in what looked like various tattoos that radiated power. Issei also let his hair grow out a bit as it was long, reaching the bottom of his neck, spiky black hair with red tips in a ponytail, and 3 green beads at the end of his hair. His ears were also pierced on both sides, with a 3D diamond shape of glowing emerald, with the vertices covered in metal, courtesy of a certain equipped knight, and a dragon fang necklace wrapped snugly around his neck. Adding to that was the sharp and elegant features of his face with his narrowed eyes, gave him a bad boy vibe that drove the fairer sex crazy. I'll admit that I didn't think he would have been able to return home, but I got to admit that now that we're back after all of that, it feels weird, Vali said as Issei nodded in response. Agreed. I'm surprised that we've only been gone for 2 months, even though it feels like it's been longer than that. Issei said as he let out a tired sigh while Vali looked at his rival's eyes and could tell they were sharp and severe as a true warrior who had seen battle and many casualties in war. Yeah. I was surprised by the number of enemies we faced there, especially the dragons since they were much stronger than I imagined. If it weren't for the armor I got from Idola's, I probably would have been a goner. Vali said as he tapped his shoes on the ground before Issei nodded in agreement. Indeed. The time we spent there were memories I won't forget, though I'm not sure when we'll be able to return. As far as I know, it was a one-way trip. Issei said as he felt he had left another family back in another world. Vali could tell Issei was saddened by this before he put a hand of comfort on his rival's left shoulder. I know how you feel. It was like I was with my old group again, but it felt more special thanks to the old man. I finally know what it's like to have a real family and friends. Vali said as he was glad the old man and the iron and lighting dragon idiots knocked some sense into him. Heh. If Gagiel and Laxus were here now, they'd try to kick your ass. Ha. They can try, but it'll always end the same way. Them being buried 6 feet under my boot. Vali said as Issei chuckled in response before the White Dragon Emperor revealed his new wings and looked back at Issei. I'm going to go reunite with my friends. You okay being out here on your own? Yeah. I'll be fine. Besides, I still have a month to train before the match, so I will enjoy training my abilities and the weapons I gained from Earthland and Eden. Also, don't get into trouble, so I must bail you out again. Issei said with a smirk as Vali chuckled at the comment before flying away, while Issei waved at his friends back. Issei then walked through the plains field and headed towards his cottage that he was staying in before smiling at the nostalgic memories of his time staying in a particular apartment with Vali. Heh. I never would have thought I'd miss coming back here. Issei said as he then summoned the boosted gear, but instead of the clunky gauntlet, he was able to change it and make it suit his fighting style, but one thing he didn't forget was that the boosted gear wasn't the same now that the dragon and the past users were gone. It's strange. It feels like Drag and the other users are somehow free from the boosted gear, but are still connected to it. Issei said as he recalled his experience in the other world and how he had faced beings more powerful than he ever dreamed of. Which was a reality check for him as Issei felt fear and almost death when the dragons and their family faced the threats that were within that world, such as Zeref and Aknologia, heck even Faust. The enemies of that world were far more potent than the ones he faced in his world. My only regret is how I had to make that sacrifice to help defeat Acnologia once and for all, Issei said as he recalled the deal he made with Drake and the past users of the boosted gear. What? But if I take all of your power, Drake, that means why you'll die. I wanted to find a way to bring you back with a body of your own. There has to be another way. Issei shouted at Drake as the dragon knew this would happen before he patted the boy's head and had a look of acceptance on his face. It is alright, partner. I've given up on trying to regain my body for thousands of years because now I have another reason. To help you fight that bastard and take him down. Drake said as the past users could feel the boy's sadness and pain before Issei slowly nodded as he held his left hand out. Okay, Drake. I promise I'll put your power to good use and make sure I kill that son of a bitch for calling us a false dragon. Issei said with a confident smile that Drake recognized before the dragon smiled as he used a paw and touched a hand before their world was littered with a bright crimson light. Who is about to awaken? Drake began to turn into magic, as did the past users, as they joined in on the chant that Issei was saying. I am the Red Dragon Emperor who has discarded the principles of domination. Issei let tears fall from his eyes as he recalled the memories he shared with his friend and brother of a dragon as he watched the past users vanish and become magic that entered his body. I shall walk the road of righteousness with infinite hopes and dreams. Issei personally thanked the past users as they all went inside him and filled him with power, as well as the most potent male and female users of the boosted gear. We're proud of you, kid. Always. So go back and kick that dragon's ass. Also, make sure you tell Urza how you feel. You two are quite a pair. Issei blushed at both Belzerd and Elsha's words before the two vanished, leaving only Issei and Drake. I shall become the king of Crimson Dragon. Drake smiled at those words, since Issei had proven himself to be a worthy king instead of a pawn, due to how much he's grown as a leader and a man before the dragon of domination used a talon and wiped the boy's tears from his eyes. Issei cried as he hugged the dragon's body, which Drake didn't mind as he was grateful to have met Issei and had gotten to know him. I'm so proud of you, Issei Haidu. You've become a fine man and someone worthy of becoming a king. I wouldn't be surprised if you were offered to become a Mao. Be careful out there, Issei, alright. I won't be able to keep you out of trouble, so learn to love and forgive those who hurt you, Issei. You deserve happiness and a good life. Goodbye, my brother, Issei Haidu. Drake said with one last smile. Issei saw Drake close his eyes as he became magic and entered his host's body before Issei looked around him and saw he was alone within the boosted gear. Issei clenched his left fist as he felt his power become much more potent than before as he finished the chant. And I promise you all. I shall show you the future which shines in true crimson light. And thus, the king of the Crimson Dragon was born. Issei let a few tears fall as he clenched his left fist once again before smiling at the memory of the dragon. I promise, Drake. I promise I'll make you so proud you envy my achievements. Issei said as he could hear the dragon chuckle in amusement at the idea before goading the boy to go for it and prove it. Issei then decided to walk outside and summon the weapons he had gathered from his adventures in the other world. The first to appear was Ascalon, as the Holy Dragon Slayer blade was still radiating its holy aura and was fond of being close to its master. It was a perfect partner and weapon when Issei was training to get better at using a sword and guns in combat. The second one was his first new weapon in the other world, as it looked like a spear that split into 4 jagged blades perpendicular to one another and curved inwards, resembling a claw. Still, thanks to the upgrades on the spear, it could use all of its transformations with ease, so Issei could better understand how to use it. The third was a combination of magic weapons obtained from Idolas as the weapon combined with a sealed flame blade and the air shatter cannon. Since at first, the two weapons were only good for a few battles, but then Issei had an idea of combining them both, so with some help and a few upgrades, it was now a cannon sword that was able to shoot concentrated attacks in the form of fireballs, tornado, air blasts, and combined magic attacks. The next one is an armor Urza gave to Issei when he was interested in the armor, since it went well with his knight form when using the balance breaker. The armor was originally a two-tone dress largely open in the middle and had a ribbon visible around her neck, which was tied around the collar. It also came with armored gauntlets, which covered the entirety of one's forearms. Usually, there would be a pair of bunny-eared greaves adorning the knee guards composed of plates attached to a couple of high heels, but Issei had it changed to suit a dragon. As for his head, instead of getting a band with bunny ears, Issei got dragon horns that amused him and the armor's weapon of choice, which happened to be a pair of twin blades. His following few weapons were the blades that Urza gave to him when the swords chose Issei to be their new master. Issei was surprised by this before Urza told him that the edges select the ones they want to wield, so if they wished for Issei to be their owner, she would allow them to be with him. The first two swords were the Fire Dragon's Flames and the Ice Devil's Chill, which were exciting swords for him, since he wasn't used to using magic weapons besides the boosted gear armor, which led to Urza training Issei like crazy to use his new swords and guns. However, his deadliest sword within his arsenal is the Demon Blade Benizakura. The sword was only meant to be used for offensive purposes, but that was only one of its abilities. The sword can be classified as a glass cannon, since it can increase its power by pouring magic into it. Still, Issei was able to beat that issue, since he was able to use his transfer ability and made the sword even sharper and more durable when he asked Urza to wield it, but to their surprise, the blade fused with a boosted gear, similar to when Issei did the same to Ascalon. The two knights were surprised as the blade even changed appearance, since it had dragon scales descending the sword's edge. Urza was intrigued, so she let Issei keep the blade, since she felt the sword was reacting to his power whenever it was summoned. Issei still felt like he was taking Urza's swords unintentionally, so he decided to get her a new blade to make up for the one he took, which Urza didn't mind, which led to a shopping trip to the blacksmith and the bakery to get their strawberry cake. Overall, it was a fair trade and a nice day to shop for something. And lastly, the final weapon Issei had in his arsenal wasn't a sword, but a massive weapon that suited his Crimson Rook armor. The Holy Hammer. It reminded Issei of the time he used the fake Mjolnir in the battle with Loki. Still, the hammer shrunk down for Issei to use in his Crimson Rook armor, and it was surprisingly easy for him to use in combat because it was so light and could even protect him from that dreadful sound magic. Heh. In becoming more of a dragon than a human, I got greedy when it came to power. Issei said as he laughed a bit before pondering how Vali was doing with his new powers and weapons, since he upgraded the Sacred Gear's balance breaker form. But Vali. So let me get this straight, you and Issei got caught in another world due to the hero faction using Lost Dimension, which connected to said other world you were in for 2 years. Azazel asked as he was surprised to see that Vali came to speak to him and inform him about what happened to both him and Issei, since the White Dragon Emperor had a feeling that Issei wouldn't be in contact with Azazel for the last month of his training. Correct. We just returned today since we could use the bridge between Earthland and Adolas to locate our world, which brings us here. Vali said as Azazel was stunned to hear this before looking at Vali and could tell he had grown more vigorous in his time in that other world. So you gained some new powers. And then some. Issei was a good sparring partner, along with a few idiots who were amusing to laugh at since they caused so much damage and reminded me too much of the new Mau faction. Vali said as he groaned at the idea of putting up with the hot-headed idiot, the iron-headed idiot, the ice stripper, and the thunder dragon user. Ha. That sounds like some of the people in the new Mau faction. And an old perverted geezer who's just like you, Vali said with a smirk as Azazel defended himself. Hey. Too mean. Azazel said as he wiped his crocodile tears while Vali smiled as he looked at his father figure before sighing to himself. I will probably regret this, but would you like to see my new balance breaker? Vali asked as Azazel stopped fake crying and looked at his son in awe before hugging Vali in a bone-crushing hug. Yes. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Azazel said before letting Vi go as the White Dragon Emperor shook his dizziness away while Albion laughed at his partner. It's times like these that make me glad I don't have a body. Shut up, you lazy lizard, Vali said as Albion continued to laugh at his partner before Vali stood back and let his aura explode, which shocked Azazel since the power that Vali was releasing was around the level of a Super Mau. Incredible. Such power in such a short time. Azazel said as Vali summoned his balance breaker, which was not the standard armor. Still, it was now a massive suit of armor that resembled a magical armored mechanical dragon. It had the same color design as the Divine Dividing Gear, but the armor was more massive, as Vali explained the new armor. Meet my new balance breaker. The original name of the armor was Dorma Nim. It's a powerful suit of armor that makes all sorts of magical attacks weak against it, plus the armor functions by using magic. Still, I was able to have someone assist me in upgrading it, so I didn't have to use my reserve pool of magic, since this armor is an energy hog that requires massive amounts of magic to use its abilities. Vali said as Azazel looked at the armor in awe before asking. Got anything else or this it? Azazel asked, and he was not disappointed by the response from Vali as he removed the helmet from the armor so he could speak more clearly for the fallen governor to hear. The armor is just the start since I can still use Albion's divide power in this suit, and I added a few new upgrades, Vali said as he opened the center of the armor to show his new clothes, which were black full bodysuit that covers the user's whole body up to their neck. Throughout the suit are circuit lines. I got the idea from that game you told me about with the Ridley monster, so I call it my Zero suit. When I leave the armor temporarily, it gives me enhanced speed and strength. Vali said as Azazel was proud of his son for playing that game to help him make some friends, which did work with Issei. Sort of. Along with the suit, my armor also has weapons similar to Issei's different armor, but instead of having to switch between the armies like Issei has to, the balance breaker has them already attached, Volley said as he tapped a few commands before the armor stood up and summoned two weapons in its hands. The left hand had a teal-colored shield greatly resembling a mirror. Two trident-shaped plates adorn the sides of the shield, and a golden ornament with two white wings adorns the top of the shield. And in the right hand was a large spear-like weapon resembling a medieval javelin. The weapon consisted of a large silver spear and set into a darker colored base. Four triangular extensions protruded onto the spear from the base with a blue jewel set in each. Extending out the back are two guards, the bottom of which goes to the armor's elbow, and the top extended across the whole arm, acting as a shield to its face. Meet Ricochet the shield, which bounces back any physical and magical attacks. On the other hand, the spear is Habaraki, which can change the size of whatever it hits. Volley explained as Azazel was amazed by the design of the weapons before asking him. Can you use them in your base form as well? Oh yes. I had to undergo some training to get used to fighting with weapons since I was an absolute rookie, but I caught up quickly, thanks to the pride of wanting to outshine Issei. Volley said as he recalled the times that the two of them had sparred to get a feel for the new weapons and abilities they gained in Earthland and Adolas. Azazel was surprised by this before seeing massive bazookas emerge from the back and feeling a paralysis effect take his body. Whoa. Ow. Volley. Oh right, I knew, forgetting that the armor has massive magic bazookas on its back, and I may have covered the armor in a substance called paralysis power to make sure my enemies are paralyzed by the armor when they touch it, Volley said as he took out some powder from his storage before sprinkling some on Azazel, as he was glad that was over. Thank you, and I can tell you've changed for the better, Volley. At first, I thought you were the same, but I can tell you are not the same kid I saw at the Biblical Faction Peace Conference. Azazel said as Volley was glad to see that his old man didn't see him as the same person he was before, since Volley had learned a lot from his time in both worlds for the past 2 years. Physically he didn't look any different, but like Issei, their eyes said otherwise. Oh, I have some familiars of my own. They're nice, but they're a bit odd. Define odd. Volley then pulled out a set of unique keys since one was gold and the other was silver. The golden key was unique since the center of the bow of the key bears the symbol of the Pisces constellation on a dark background, flanked by two elongated fishes with large invisible fins and tails, overlapping in correspondence to their tiny heads and the tails themselves. The end of the key's blade takes the shape of an anchor. The silver key was designed more intricately than the golden key, since the bow was circular and bears the crest of the chisel in its center, colored green, while the blade of the key ends in a simple design, similar to other silver keys. Open, Gate of Pieces. Open, Gate of Calum. Volley said as he turned the keys to his sides as if opening a door before two portals appeared. Two koi fish came out of the Pieces gate, while the other being that emerged was a sphere with a halo-like circle at the top. It looked like it was made of metal and had lines tracing around its shape. The center of Calum's body was in a darker shade of gray than the rest of its body, and there was a small white circle with a smaller light green circle inside, giving it the appearance of an eye. Allow me to introduce my familiars. The constellation Pieces and Calum. The two are very useful to assist me since Pieces specializes in water magic and are good in combat, while Calum has two other forms to assist me in battle. Volley explained as Azazel inspected Calum and was quite impressed as it turned into its other two forms. A cannon and a sword. Interesting. Does Issei have some familiars like these too? Well. Volley began as he knew Issei's familiars were unique and a bit special in their way. That's a different story, but I'll tell you later. Right now, I want to catch up with you and my team. If you'll have me, that is. Azazel was surprised by this coming from Volley before smiling at his first son as he dragged him to his office. Hell yeah. We're drinking tonight. Volley smiled as he missed this side of his actual father figure and wasn't going to make the same mistake and take the governor for granted ever again, even if Azazel can be a pain at times. Back with Issei. Alright then. Virgo. Hi Issei-sama. Well, be doing some training, so get ready, Issei said as he looked at the one known as Virgo and smiled at the mate as she readied her chains while undoing the rope she found herself in. If I do horrible, will you punish me, master? Virgo asked as Issei sighed. He knew his two celestial spirits were different since Virgo was a masochistic one, while his other spirit was a quiet sadistic one on the enemy and definitely in the sheets. Yes. Libra and I shall punish you if you do well or not. Issei said as Virgo smiled and rubbed herself on her master's chest before smiling while pulling out some rope. Shall we begin with some foreplay first before the training? Virgo asked with stars in her eyes before Issei began to pull on Virgo's cheek and instead of crying out in pain, Virgo was blushing while turning into a puddle. Why yes, master. I'm sorry for being useless. Virgo moaned as she enjoyed the moment with her master before the masochistic maid was flattened on the ground as another person walked towards her master. The woman was curvy with dark hair tied in an oxhorn style. Her attire resembled a belly dancer's, consisting of a frilled and striped bikini top and a patterned loincloth sporting pom-poms at the waist. She wore numerous bangles on her arms and legs, and a thick necklace also concealed her neck. A simple pair of sandals was on her feet and her head was dressed with a zigzagged headband. Covering the woman's lower face is another cloth that bears her zodiac sign, tied around her head. Dangling from her hands, the woman was carrying a pair of scales, with thin cords running from her fingertips to the ranking sides, so she held them almost puppeteer-like. "Ah, Libra. Can you let Virgo go? This is enough to satisfy her M-gauge," Issei said as the woman known as Libra looked at the satisfied maid before letting up the gravity press, which made Virgo pout in sadness that it was over before Virgo stood up with a severe look on her face. "I am ready to assist Issei-sama," Virgo said as Issei nodded before Vigro dived into the ground and made a massive crater while Issei headed toward the center of the hole. "Okay. Just like Master Makarov and Irene told me when I tried to do it first," Issei said as he concentrated on the depths of his soul and looked within the boosted gear that housed the souls he consumed when learning to take over magic. Issei may be able to utilize Beast Soul, but was also able to unlock a new type of takeover magic unique to him. Dragon Soul, meaning he can take over the dragon's bodies and be able to use their abilities, similar to Marahin's Satan Soul magic and Elfman's Beast Soul. However, even though Issei could use the Dragon Soul technique on only a few dragons, his most challenging ones were the two most powerful ones within his body. Irene Bulsirian would have died by Acnologia had Issei not been permitted to use Dragon Soul on Irene and absorb her body and powers. The same was said for Acnologia since Issei was brought before the Guildmaster, as the Red Dragon Emperor was shocked to see the body of the Apocalypse Dragon before being requested to use his Dragon Soul magic on the dragon. Which surprised the boy before Makarov spoke to the boy. "Remember that even though you took over their bodies and magic, you still must be careful not to give into the beast's powers and give control to them. Otherwise, you'll lose your humanity." Issei breathed as he grabbed the souls he wished to use first. Dragon Soul. Why Drake Gotch? Issei's eyes widened as a crimson aura rose from his body before he became the heavenly dragon himself. Issei turned back to his usual self as he turned into beasts that he took over from his travels with Fairy Tail, before he looked at the two souls of the Dragon King and Queen. "I don't want to go this route, but if it's the best way to learn how to combine them, then so be it," Issei said as he took a deep breath. He reached the Dragon King soul as a massive black aura radiated around Issei's body. "The Dragon Soul. Acnologia," Issei shouted as the massive burst of magic was able to destroy the crater and expand it even more, before Issei's appearance changed to look similar to Acnologia, but different, since the only noticeable changes were that Issei's skin was darker and that his clothes changed to be identical to that of Acnologia. Issei inspected his form before taking a deep breath and opening his eyes. "Dragon Soul. Fire Dragon King Scales," Issei muttered as he saw his arms gain Irene's dragon scales before Issei could turn back to normal as he panted heavily and felt the restraints appear on Acnologia's soul again. "Damn. It was easy combining Irene and Drake's power, but whenever I try to use Acnologia's soul, I can only hold it for about 5 hours before tops, and yet when I try to combine the other dragons with the Dragon King, it rejects it and fights back," Issei said as he looked at his left arm and clenched his fist. "I swore I would be able to conquer this power, and like hell, I'll fall so easily," Issei said as he liked a challenge before seeing a projection of the Dragon King himself smirking at the boy. "Then prove it, boy. I respected you, Vali, and that brat Natsu as you defeated me, so show me you can easily use my power," the projection said with a laugh. Issei smiled as he liked the challenge before looking at both Virgo and Libra as they approached their master with concern before Issei calmed them both down. "It's okay, you two. I'm still myself, but I only got a month left, so shall we get started?" Issei asked as his right arm became enveloped in fire while his left arm became enveloped in ice magic. "We are ready to serve you, Issei-sama," Virgo and Libra said simultaneously, ready to assist their master and friend in his training. And the underworld will shake in fear as they would not be prepared for the coming of the two Dragon Kings. Vali Lucifer. The White Dragon Emperor blessed by the Dragons of Light and Shadow, and Issei Haidu. The Red Dragon Emperor that the Dragon Sage Irene and the Dragon Ignil blessed. These two will shake their world as they show their enemies and comrades how strong they've become during their departure. Sayarag Bale was disappointed in the Gremory peerage since he could tell that their resolve was weak and granted they could secure some victories, but still lacked the strength to fight against his forces. "Is this the same team I saw only 3 months ago? I must say that I'm very disappointed in my cousin," Sayarag said as he looked at his few defeated pieces and the results of the previous battles up until now. From what he had heard from the rumors in the underworld about Issei being gone for 3 months to train and get stronger, Sayrag was hoping that the others in the peerage would follow Issei's example and train as well. Still, sadly, it seemed that they hardly trained at all, which genuinely disappointed the Belair, since he was hoping that Riaz would have gotten her act together and helped her peerage get stronger. Sayrag sighed as Riaz used the intermission to decide what to do, but he knew that the only thing Riaz could do was send out a remaining bishop, since the girl hadn't even entered the arena yet. And Hirai was hoping to face Issei in a great battle, but he hasn't shown up yet. I do hope he'll be here soon. Sayrag said as his queen came to his side and smiled at him. There's no need to worry, Sayrag. I'm sure Issei will show up. After all, he's been looking forward to this battle as well, just as much as you. The Bale Queen said as Sayrag smiled in response before he felt a powerful aura enter the arena. A very familiar aura made the Belair smile at this feeling. Oh yes, my queen. It seems he's shown up after all, Sayrag said as he headed into the arena to fight the one man he knew would give him a good battle. Issei Haidu? On the Gremory side. A bit earlier. Riaz Gremory chewed on her nails to alleviate the pressure she could feel trying to swallow her up. It was only down to herself and Asia against the most potent youth devil, Saryard Bale. Her beloved Issei was nowhere to be seen. This day was not going as she had hoped it would. It started as her prize pawn and love interest, Haidu Issei, who left 3 months ago to train in a secluded location, didn't show up on the morning of the most significant day yet for her peerage. Those 3 months felt more like 30 years to her. Riaz could hardly concentrate on improving herself as she was desperate to see her precious pawn again and apologized to him for behaving so selfishly. It was all she could think about these last 2 months, and she was sure the rest of her peers were in the same situation. Riaz knew that being unfocused before such a vast match asked for trouble, but she couldn't help it. Her delicate maiden heart still yearned for his attention. Even though Riaz knew she didn't deserve it. Her team was already on edge due to their missing member, so the trip there didn't calm their nerves. Arriving at the venue, they received the news that Issei would be a little late from Azazel, whom he reached via his familiar, the Skithblathner. It still pained her to think he contacted Azazel and not her to inform her. It hurt even more to know that he could have contacted her or her peers during these last 3 months. She wondered if he was still upset with her. She asked if he hated her and wanted nothing to do with her anymore, along with other nonsensical scenarios like him eloping Aphrodite, who seduced him away from her. What a slut. The maiden's heart is complicated, and she knew she was being ridiculous, but Riaz couldn't help herself. She convinced herself that Issei just needed some time away to sort out whatever he needed to, and she hoped that when he got back, things could return to the way they were, or maybe even better if her dream came true. After arriving in the underworld, the Gremory peerage, Azazel and Irina, made their way to Agriz. It was a city on a floating island in the sky, located in the Aegir's territory. The current head of the Aegir's clan intervened after the disputes between the current Mag faction and the Great King faction to agree on the match's location. It was a tumultuous situation regarding the raiding game, which was supposed to be a platform for the youth devils to showcase their power. Still, instead, it became tainted with greed and the higher-ups' politics and is now acting as a representative war between the Mag faction and the Great King faction. After getting their pre-game talk out of the way and arriving at the stadium, the Gremory peerage discovered the raiding game's special rules, dice figure. The rules were simple. Each king rolled a single die, and they could then send out combatants whose value, in terms of pieces, equaled the combined number moved by both kings. It was good that these rules were in effect. If it had been a regular game, Issei would have been disqualified for being late. He doesn't have to fight unless sent out by Riaz, leaving him enough time to make it to the stadium. As the first match got underway, Riaz sent out her knight, Kiba Yudo, to go against the knight from Saryard's peerage, Baruka Furkaz. It was a tough match for Yudo, as he went up against a member of the Furkaz clan whose specialty was controlling horses. In the end, Yudo used deception and his surprising second balance breaker, Glory Drag Trooper from the Blade Blacksmith half of his holy demonic sword, to take down Baruka, earning the Gremory peerage an early win. The second match featured the rooks, Roswi S and Kaneko, against the rook, Gandoma Balam, and the knight, Liban Cressel. It was a tough match for the rooks, as Balam's overwhelming strength and defense, and Cressel's trickery and sacred gear, Gravity Jail, proved quite an obstacle. However, Roswi S's extraordinary intellect and Kaneko's incredible fortitude earned them the win, the second in a row for the Gremory peerage. Unfortunately, it came at a cost because Kaneko was taken out, ultimately devastating her teammates. The third match was a magic battle between Akeno and Saryard's Bishop Coriana Andrealphus. It was a flashy battle with lots of elemental magic thrown around, but in the end, Akeno's magic prowess was too much for the Bishop of Saryard as she was defeated, earning Riaz 3 straight wins for her peerage. The fourth match pitted Zenobia and Gaspar, who surprisingly volunteered, against the descendants from extinct pillar houses. The bishop, Mistina Savnok, and the rook, Ladora Bune. It was a brutal match. Thanks to Savnok's sacred gear, Trick Vanish, Zenovia's ex-Durandal, was sealed, leaving her defenseless. But almost everyone was surprised as Gasper stood up to the plate and took a ruthless beating while stalling for time as he tried to unseal Zenovia's holy sword. He succeeded in the end but was eliminated, but not after giving a genuinely marvelous and moving performance, allowing a highly emotional Zenovia to sweep through both opponents, with her ex-Durandal earning a fourth win for the Gremory peerage. The fifth match was Queen vs Queen, with Akeno against Kusha Abaddon, an extra demon from the House of Abaddon. Again, similar to her previous game, it was a magical battle. The Akeno had the advantage of pure power, however, Kusha was much more resourceful, especially with her clan's signature move, Hole. Ultimately, Akeno's lack of knowledge of the skill was her downfall, as her holy lightning was turned against her, with Kusha earning the first win for Saraerg's peerage. The sixth match saw the king, Saraerg, step forward to face the Udo, Zenovia, and Roswies team. They worked well to go against the monster strength and speed of Saraerg, along with his overflowing Tauki. They even managed to sever his arm, forcing him to use his Phoenix Tear. But in the end, his overwhelming power proved too much for the trio, as they succumbed to defeat in the future. The seventh match saw Saraerg send out his queen again, as they were the only two left in the peerage. Riaz had to step out herself as she couldn't risk Asia. The battle was, again, magic intensive as demonic powers flew all over the place. Kusha proved to be quite the combatant and pushed Riaz to the edge. But in the end, the power of destruction was far too much for the queen to handle, and she was defeated. Luckily, Riaz had Asia to heal her after the beating she took. This brings us to the current situation. Only Saraerg was left in his peerage. He automatically took to the field. Riaz was in a pinch now, as her only option was to send out Asia, as a single combatant couldn't fight two matches in a row. Riaz was at the end of her rope. She still had her earpiece on and was consulting with the rest of her peers, who were under supervision in the medical room, but could still watch the match. Issei-kun isn't here yet, Riaz, it seems we have no choice but to send out Asia-chan. As soon as the match starts, have her forfeit. If Issei-kun is not here by then, you must take on Saraerg yourself. Akeno stated logically as she reclined on a hospital bed, recovering from her injuries. All around her were the rest of the peerage, who were also awake with their earpieces on, watching the game. Riaz just let out a sigh. You're right, of course. Do you think you can handle it, Asia? Questioned Riaz to her adorable bishop. Said the blonde, nodded her head firmly. Hi Wani-sama. I won't let you down. Exclaimed Asia as she cutely pumped her fist, bringing a smile to her king's face. Good luck Asia-san. We will be here waiting for you in the medical room. Udo and the rest of the peerage gave their timid bishop friend well wishes. Are you ready to go, Asia? Questioned Riaz. After all, she only had a minute and a half left to submit her combatant. Asia nodded and prepared to step into the magic circle, but a voice in their ears stopped her and the rest of the peerage in their tracks. Man. If I knew you guys were this desperate, I would have been here much sooner. Also, there is no need to send Asia to battle against Saraerg. I'll take it from here. A familiar deep voice that was brimming with confidence and charisma. They had their earpiece, which was only given out to members of their peerage. It took them a while to recognize him since they hadn't heard his voice in almost 3 months, not to mention his voice had changed a little, but there was no doubt in their mind. Their pawn had finally returned. Issei-kun Issei-senpai Issei-san. Exclaimed the peerage all at once as an overwhelming sense of relief washed over them. The most powerful member of their peerage was finally here and just in time. After 3 months without his soothing presence, they felt the floodgates open. They truly learned to appreciate their pawn on a whole other level compared to before, as his absence sapped the motivation from most of them. As Azazel once pointed out, he was the heart of the team. Asia, Akeno, and Gasper shed tears unashamedly, and even Kaneko's eyes were a little misty, though she tried to hide it. Kiba and Roswies were slightly more reserved in their reaction, but no less relieved, especially Roswies, who was suspiciously blushing and teary-eyed, not that anyone noticed. Issei. Whispered Riaz softly as tears rolled down her face. It felt as if a huge weight had been lifted off her shoulders. Issei had this strange ability to put people at ease, raise their spirits, and give them courage with his presence. She was sure her peerage felt the same. Now that he was here, they were filled with hope. This was one of the reasons she fell in love with him. He was a blazing sun piercing through the darkness of this world. You did well out there, Gasper. I'm proud of you, little buddy. You, as well, Kaneko. You all have done your parts, now it's time I do mine. Sorry I'm late, but I'll take things from here. This is my fight. You guys sit back and enjoy the show. Issei said quietly, self-assuredly, that the rest of them didn't know he had. Gasper was beaming at the praise of his favorite senpai, and Kaneko blushed at his words. The others sat up a little straighter upon hearing his words. There was always a quiet confidence in them regarding Issei and his ability to pull through in a fight, and they knew that the only person in their peerage who could even remotely face Saraerg head-on was Issei. Even though the conversation was being held via earpieces, they could practically feel his confidence oozing off. It was an incredibly reassuring feeling, as his teammates simultaneously, however, it intimidated them to the point that they felt the need to submit to him. It only lasted a few seconds before the feeling disappeared, making them feel like they had just imagined it. Riaz wanted to say something. To apologize for her behavior the last time they spoke. To ask for forgiveness, but the words caught in her throat. She was far too engrossed in the sound of his voice, which she hadn't heard in 3 months. It sounded much manlier and more mature as well. She knew now was not the time, as he needed to focus on the fight. So she did the only thing she could. "Good luck, Issei," she whispered. "Thank you, Riaz. We'll talk after this battle is over." Issei replied before he cut off the connection and moved toward the arena. Riaz felt a little disheartened at the response. If it were Issei of a few months, he would have stumbled over himself and tried to reassure her that he could win and do it for her. He would then have a lewd look as he imagined how she would reward him, most of them involving her breasts. She let out a sad smile to herself. It seemed like her beloved Issei had changed since he left. She only hoped he didn't resent her. As did the others who knew they were on bad terms with Issei after what they did to him. And now, back to the battle. It's time this dragon took flight. Saraerg Baal, you are someone I acknowledge as a worthy opponent. However, today, you will be a stepping stone to my ascension. I honestly don't think you are ready for what's about to hit you. Issei said as he summoned his wings, which were much more extensive than his old devil wings. Then, he walked through the portal, smiling as he looked forward to this matchup. Watch over me, Dragon Fairy Tail. Thanks to you, I'll show them how strong I've become. Issei said, feeling that Drake was still there and that the bonds he had made with Fairy Tail were as strong as ever. The op-eyed dragon part section of the stands filled with many children of the underworld. Most were commoners or children of reincarnated devils, meaning low-class devils of a low social caste. They were all allowed to attend the event today, though, along with their parents, thanks to their hero, the op-eyed dragon, who covered the cost of the tickets and their snacks and beverages, allowing them to be here today. The excitement was palpable as they all witnessed their first live rating game. They were excitedly talking to their parents and friends about the matches they saw and the extraordinary abilities on show. They were all waiting for their idol, the legendary Chichiru Iwate, to appear. Sitting in the front of the section was the manager of the Sekiryu Iwate, Ravel Phoenix. She took the initiative to be the representative cheerleader of this section of the stadium. When Issei-sama contacted her and asked her to organize this initiative on his behalf and transferred an obscene amount of money into a particular bank account that he gave her full access to, Ravel was at first shocked before she felt an immense sense of pride swell up in her chest. She expected nothing less from the man she had chosen to become her king. His kindness and benevolence knew no bounds, and she was honored that he trusted her above all others to accomplish this task. Ravel took to it with gusto, arranging everything with alarming efficiency. She ensured that her Issei-sama got the recognition for his deed, even though he asked her not to worry about it. She spent most of the match pumping the kids up and encouraging them to show their support for their favorites. On the outside, she was cool, calm, and collected, but on the inside, she experienced a turbulence of emotions. She was perturbed. The main reason she was here is that she has yet to show up. She could feel, as she was sure the rest of the spectators could, that the end was nigh. It was down to just Saraerg Baal on one end against Riaz-sama, Asia-san and Issei-sama. The problem is that Issei-sama has yet to fight a match and was absent when the team walked out to the field. Ravel could hear many whispers, mainly from snooty high-class devils, about how the mighty Red Dragon Emperor fled with his tail between his legs at the prospect of fighting a high-class devil of the pure house of Baal. She silently gritted her teeth as she willed herself not to incinerate those pests. Ravel was sure they were putting on airs and hoping to earn some favor with Zekrom Baal, the original Great King. These people sickened her to the core, and she wondered if this was what the future genuinely held for her race. It's one of the reasons she became so infatuated with Issei-sama in the first place. He was so unconventional, so unorthodox from the usual stuck-up devils. He didn't care about traditions or customs, he just spoke his mind and did what he wanted. To her, he was a beacon of light representing hope for her and the future. That's why she promised herself that she would train her mind and body so that when the time came, she would be a woman worthy to stand by his side. While contemplating these matters, she heard the commentator's voice signal that the time for strategies and decision-making was up and the time for the 8th match was now. She crossed her fingers, hoping he got here in time. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back from that short break. I hope you packed up on some snacks because the 8th match is set to get underway and will be a doozy. Governor Azazel, Emperor Belial, what has been your impression of the game so far? questioned the commentator, Nod Gamajan, from the House of Gamajan of the former 72 Pillars. He was a professional commentator with years of experience covering rating games. He was quite enthusiastic about his job as well. Well, it certainly has been exciting to watch. The kids down there are performing far above the standards of such youngsters, which feels like a professional match. While the Gremory Peerage shot out the blocks by grabbing the wins in the first 4 matches, Saraerg and his queen turned it around spectacularly. The Gremory Peerage still has 3 members left. Riaz, the king, Asia Argento, the bishop, and Haidu Issei, the pawn. Although Saraerg is alone on the other end, you can't help but feel he has the advantage here. Such is the overwhelming strength he possesses, and as he is the only one left on his team, he is automatically the next contestant. Since Riaz fought the previous match, she is barred from fighting. Asia Argento, as you know, is the group's healer and, as such, has yet to combat experience to take on Saraerg. The most logical choice, and the matchup we all came here to watch, would be Haidu Issei. However, he has yet to make an appearance despite many opportunities. Was Riaz saving him for the end? We'll find out soon enough. Stated Azazel. He was having a lot of fun commenting on this match and spoke the truth when he said he wanted to see Issei versus Saraerg. He wanted to see the results of Ice's training. He was sure that wherever he was, Volley was at this moment hoping to see a good fight from his rival. I couldn't agree more with the governor. This match has exceeded expectations, especially considering it is an exhibition match with Youth Devils yet to debut officially. The young Devils certainly put on a good show and have shown us great hope for the future of Devils. I look forward to the end as it will surely prove gripping. Said the emperor of the rating games, Diehauser Belial. He truly enjoyed the performance of these youngsters. He hoped one of them would rise to the top and give him a good match. Well, there you have it, folks, straight from the mouths of the experts. But I'm sure you're tired of hearing us talk. Let's get this match started. Shouted Nod into his mic as the crowd went wild. We have the official submissions for this match, and I can tell you straight away that it will be a one-on-one match, despite the value of the offer being 12. From the Bale corner, the only available participant but certainly the most dangerous, the strongest youth devil in the heir of the house of Bale, Saraerg Bale. Shouted Nod as cheers rang around the stadium for Saraerg as he coolly walked out to the field and stopped in the middle. He looked in top condition despite having fought a match earlier. His arm also looked back in top shape despite having it lopped off earlier. The Phoenix Tear he used fixed the damage, leaving him raring to go. He hoped his opponent didn't disappoint him. As these thoughts circled his mind, the officials in charge of the match reinforced the arena and put up a powerful shield to protect the spectators. And his opponent from the Gremory Peerage. Ooh, oh boy, do we fight with our hands here, ladies and gentlemen. It's the fight we've all been waiting for. Here he comes, the Op-Eye Dragon, the pawn of Riaz Gremory, and Red Dragon Emperor Issei Haidu. Roared the commentator as the roof came off the arena from the cheers of the spectators, mainly the reincarnated and commoner devils, as one of their own and someone they looked to for inspiration entered the hall. More than a few people were taken aback when he walked into the arena, including his fellow peerage members, Irina, Serziches, Grafia, who just raised her eyebrow elegantly, Venelana, Zeodicus, Michiel, Gabriel, the Citri peerage, the Volley team who were watching, Azazel, Serafol, his self-proclaimed rival, and his manager Ravel. Such was the drastic change in Ice, not just in appearance, but also in his aura. Adding to that was the sharp and elegant features of his face with his narrowed eyes, gave him a bad boy vibe that drove the fairer sex crazy. Suffice it to say that many women in the arena had difficulty controlling their blush at the sight of such a fine specimen, regardless of whether they were in relationships. Such was the case for the Gremory men, who were shedding manly tears at the fact that their usually calm and collected wives were blushing at the sight of Issei Haidu. Riaz couldn't believe what she was seeing from her pawn. Had 3 months made such a change in him? The way he walked and the confidence pouring out of him made it seem like he was ready to take on the world. She blushed at the thought of how strong his body looked now and wondered how good it would feel to be embraced by him. Sona Citri, student council president of Kuo Academy and best friend of Riaz, was stumped. She had always perceived herself as a creature of logic and intellect. However, even to her logical mind, the young man she witnessed now seems to take reason, bend it over a table, and fuck it in the ass. She could still remember him peeping on the kendo club and getting the tar beaten out of him daily, and now he exudes an aura that screams alpha male. She still remembers her pity for Riaz when she reincarnated him, as she thought he would never amount to anything, and he was worthless without his sacred gear. Of course, over the months, he proved her wrong multiple times, and she had no problem admitting she was wrong. But looking at him now, she couldn't help but feel regret at having passed him over, allowing Riaz to take him over her preconceived notions, instead of looking at him more deeply. For her part, Ravel was blushing up such a storm that one could almost see the steam leaving her face. She had always had delusions and fantasies of her Isama that beautified him to an unnerving extent. It was her guilty pleasure, but to see him like this, looking so cool, so assured, and so ruggedly handsome, made her heart and other parts of her body that shall not be mentioned throb excitedly. She could feel his aura of dominance from in the stands, calling for her to submit to her future king and master, and boy, did she want to. Before she got carried away, though, she got a hold of herself. She needed to be patient. This was not the time to indulge in her selfish desires. Issei needed her support and planned on giving him all he could handle as she stood up and encouraged the children and fans in the Op-Eye Dragon section to cheer and applaud their hero. She almost fainted when she looked back at the arena and saw Issei Sama looking at her as he gave her a wink before continuing in. It was an excellent day for her and she couldn't wait to be officially his. In body and spirit. XD. Ladies and gentlemen, this contest is about to get underway. The stadium has been reinforced in preparation and powerful shields are erected around the spectator areas. Instead of the regular subspace in the dimensional gap, due to the popularity of these two and the anticipation of this fight, this match will take place right here, announced Nod. The cheers were deafening as the air of anticipation around the stadium rose to fever pitch. Issei was still making his way to the center of the arena, where Saraerd Bale stood with Rudiger Rosenkreutz, the arbitrator of this rating game. Many of the older generation and some of the new ones noticed how Ice moved. He moved with deadly elegance, like a sharpened katana. Sharp, lethal, and silent as he moved through the air. Many were impressed, not to mention a little intimidated. Most of the more zealous high-class devils turned their noses up at the sight of another unenlightened barbarian. They were sweating a bit though, and tried not to quiver in fear at the sensation of his presence. Unknown to anyone but Issei, he was releasing short, controlled bursts of aura, not enough to knock someone out, but just enough to exert his dominance. Saraerd, though, was grinning in anticipation. His opponent had considerably changed since their friendly spar a few months back. He looked a lot more dangerous. This fight was looking to be one he could truly enjoy. He may even have to resort to using his secret weapon, and he was excited at the prospect of that happening. As Issei finally reached the center, he stood opposite Saraerd and stared at him unflinchingly. He could vaguely hear the arbitrator recite the rules of the match, but he was more focused on his opponent, and it seemed his opponent was the same. Saraerd stared him in the eyes with a challenging grin, instead of the emotionless look Issei wore on his. Zoom in. The Op-Eye Dragon. Those were the cheers of the children from the Op-Eye Dragon fan area, with Ravel leading them. Issei completely ignored Saraerd and Rudiger, who were explaining the permutations of the match, as he turned to the stand with his fans. They saw him show emotion for the first time today, as he gave the children a warm and kind smile, and waved at them in acknowledgement and thanks for their support. Many women swooned at the sight, including his fellow peerage members, and, though she would deny this for as long as she lived, Sona Citri was quite aroused by this new Issei. Her pawn, Saji Genshiro, saw this and felt like someone kicked his puppy at seeing the woman he was majorly crushing on blush at the actions of a well-known pervert. He settled for glaring daggers at his friend-rival fellow pervert, trying to send a mental signal. Seriously, man, come on. I thought we were friends. As he finished his greetings, he returned to his original spot to find an irritated Rudiger Rosenkreutz, who just finished his explanation, and an amused Saraerd. After getting the agreement for a clean fight, the arbitrator left via magic circle to his spectator area and officially started the 8th match of this rating game. Before we begin, Saraerd, I wanted to tell you that, granted, people expect me to use my boosted gear, but after these last 3 months, I must inform you that I won't be using my balance breaker, Issei said to the shock of many as he continued. I want to enjoy this match as long as I can, so I sealed my strength with the 5 tattoos on my left arm, Issei said as he showed his left arm before taking off a ring on his right hand, which shocked the devils as they saw a massive aura be released from the Red Dragon Emperor's body. What is this power? It's way higher than Issei's power was in the previous ratings game, so what caused this change in him? The commentator asked Azazel, and the fallen governor replied to him. For that, we'll have to ask Vali since he knows more about Issei's transformation and power. All he could tell me was that Issei had grown a lot after facing a far more powerful dragon than even Crom Cruch. This is also why Drag is outside the boosted gear or past users. They are not of this world anymore. Azazel said as the audience was shocked at this moment before Issei took over. What Azazel said is true. Drag and I were training until we had to fight a dragon, unlike Tannen, Tiamat, or even Crom Cruch. His name was Achnologia. The Apocalypse Dragon and I wouldn't be standing here had it not been for Drag and the past users sacrificing themselves to give me the power I needed to destroy him. So now the boosted gear is still functional, but the past users and Drag are no longer within it. Issei said as he had a melancholy face while recalling that day. Sayrag nodded in agreement as he could understand that the boy, no, the man before him, had undergone so much in the past 3 months. So, will you still fight with the boosted gear? Its base form, yes, but for you, Sayrag, I shall give you a chance to see my balance breaker, but you'll have to earn it, Issei said as he held out his left hand before the demon blade Benizakura appeared as its aura radiated with its partner. Benizakura shook in anticipation, wanting to fight the enemy before it, which made Issei amused by the sword's thirst for battle. Sayrag smiled at this. He could tell Issei still wished to honor the duel and didn't want to end it since he was also looking forward to the battle. Very well then, Issei Haidu. I accept the handicap. Sayrag said as Issei chuckled in response before the previous kind and warm expression toward his fans bled off his face, leaving Issei with an impassive look as he stared directly at Sayrag, who just shivered in anticipation. No words were spoken as both combatants measured each other with their gaze. The tension in the area was suffocating, as many people were chewing on their nails in anticipation and nervousness, waiting for something to happen. Then, let the final battle begin with that out of the way. Azazel shouted as Sayrag got the match started. With speed that was untraceable to most, making it look like he vanished from his spot, Sayrag flanked Issei, cocking his hand into a fist, and threw a powerful and precise jab at the right side of his head. The entire motion was less than a second, and only a select few in the audience could even follow the whole movement. To the rest, it looked like Sayrag blurred out of existence. When the time finally caught up, and it looked like a vicious haymaker was about to connect with his face, Issei, with reflexes that bordered on inhumane, reached up and caught the punch just a few inches away from his face, creating a shockwave that almost visibly spread through the air. He did so without changing his expression or moving his eyes to follow the movement. Sayrag was a little put out that his preemptive strike was stopped so effortlessly. While externally looking impassive and uncaring, Issei was internally squealing like a fanboy in his head. Damn, I look so fucking badass right now. I've always wanted to do something like that. It's like Aizen from Bleach stopping Ichigo with a single finger. I have to thank Gilderts for helping me perfect that. Haha. Issei thought before he went on the counterattack, like a coiled viper, as Sayrag was still in a daze at having his punch, the same punch that destroyed the spirits of many high-class devils, stopped so quickly. Issei retaliated with a powerful and perfectly executed roundhouse kick to the head that sent Sayrag skidding back. As Sayrag regained his bearings, he looked back up to see Issei still with his left leg outstretched from the kick. He held it there for a while before using his right foot as a fulcrum and calmly bringing his leg back down to the original position he had before launching the kick, looking majorly excellent while doing so. Sayrag felt something on the side of his mouth and used the back of his hand to wipe it off. As he looked at the substance, he realized it was his blood. You could hear a pin drop as the stadium was engulfed in silence, with many varying reactions from shock, disbelief, excitement, and strangely arousal. Don't ask about that last one. The shocking part wasn't that he just caught a lightning-quick punch from Sayrag, but that he did so without taking any damage, as his punches were known to be monstrously destructive. What they did know was that they were going to be in for one hell of a fight. The cheers rang through the arena as they were encouraged to put on a show. Issei then channeled magic into the blade, and the sword began to shiver in excitement. Before Issei went on the attack, he vanished with speed that was on par with a Mayu-class devil, as Sayrag barely had the time to block the attack, as he coated his arms with Taki to absorb the impact while behind him, the arena was shaking from the blast. The sword shocked the audience until Issei leaped away as he summoned 2 other swords. Equip armor. Crimson Dragon Knight, Issei said as he donned the armor Urza gave him. He didn't draw the twin swords at his side, but instead stabbed the demon sword into the ground. Equip weapons. Fire Dragon's Flames and the Ice Devil's Chill, Issei said as the 2 swords appeared in his hands, which surprised the many knights in the audience, since they could tell that they were mighty blades, until Issei picked up the demon sword again, and closed his eyes, as the edges glowed brightly, until the swords fused to form a deadlier sword that radiated not only energy, but also a dragon's fires and the devil's ice magic. Seraphil shivered as she could tell that the flames and ice from the 2 weapons were mighty before Issei charged at Sayrag. She was prepared for this as he met Issei's sword strikes with his punches, but the shockwave from the impact caused fire and ice to explode, either burning or freezing parts of the arena. Issei fought with speed and power as well as swordsmanship skills that the Gremory peerage couldn't believe, since they knew Issei was more of a brawler than a swordsman, but seeing him now made them realize that he wasn't just focusing on his technique during the last few months. Issei and Sayrag smiled as they enjoyed this battle a lot, and Sayrag was amazed by the weapons. At the same time, Issei summoned his massive holy hammer, Ascalon, and even the deadly wind flame sword, which made Azazel want to study it to see how Issei could wield it so well. Once their clashes ended, the 2 separated as they caught their breath and collected themselves before bursting towards each other. Issei put away his weapons and met Sayarag in the center, and their fists crossed each other and impacted the other's face in a cross counter that they held before backing off to regain their bearings and take stock of the situation. As they took their time, the commentator sprang into action. Amazing folks. What an exhibition of pure physical combat by both young men. They evenly exchanged powerful attacks, and they barely looked out of breath. If anything, they look ready to go for more. Nod announced as Azazel nodded as well. Indeed, it was quite the demonstration of hand-to-hand combat. I can feel the intensity of those blows from all the way here in the commentary box. What's also interesting to note is that Issei has yet to use his sacred gear, whether it means by boosting himself or by the balance breaker. Azazel stated, surprising many as they were so caught up in the battle that they didn't even notice that point. Back on the field, both fighters measured the other up. It seems you've drastically improved since we traded blows a few months ago. Seeing you match my punches gets my blood pumping. I haven't had a good fight in a while. Sayarag said as the force of Issei's attacks, by his weapons and punches, really caught him off guard. He didn't expect the pawn to match him head-on without his balance breaker. Maybe he was falling into one of the unsavory habits of his race. Pride. I've been working hard to reach this level. I've broken and repaired my body numerous times to attain this strength. I'm sure you understand what that means better than anyone else, Issei stated as he spoke for the first time in this match. His deep voice had women swooning in the audience, not that he paid attention for once, as he was focused entirely on the game. Sayarag responded with a grin filled with battle lust. You truly are a worthy opponent. Here I come. Stated Sayarag as he shot at Issei with unimaginable speed and barreled into him. They exchanged a flurry of blows, with Sayarag getting quite a few past Issei's guards, getting him to grimace slightly from the thunderous impact of the blasts. Punches, kicks, headbutts, and throws were all on the menu, as both men used their bodies as weapons to harm the other. Due to the boost from the Tauki, Sayarag had a slight advantage over Ice, which he took advantage of by raining as many blows upon him as he could. As Issei recovered, he decided to take it to the next level. Heh. Since you decided to summon your Tauki, I should also show off a little. Issei said as he backed away from Sayarag before letting out a deep breath the audience didn't know he was holding. Release seal number 1, Issei said as one of the 5 seals on his left arm vanished. His body exploded with so much aura that Sayarag felt his, while a powerful gravitational force was pressing his body. The Mayu and the Angel and Fallen factions leaders were amazed by Issei's power level until Issei's body became more of a dragon-devil hybrid as his eyes narrowed. At the same time, his teeth and claws appeared, as well as ice and fire radiating around him as he shouted to Sayarag. Sayarag Baal. Issei shouted in a commanding voice that shocked many of the devils, including the Gremory peerage, as they could hear the power that radiated from those words. You said you'd fight me with all you have, correct? Then summon your sacred gear and fight me with all your power. Issei shouted, and he could tell Sayarag wasn't at his best. This is a battle of warriors who enjoy fighting, not some ratings game between houses. As long as one of us still had the strength to stand and fight, this match wasn't over. This isn't about Riaz, the House of Baal, the Gremory House, or anyone else. This is about you and me. Right now, we are just 2 warriors on the field of battle. Nothing else should matter, yet I still feel you holding back a great deal. You haven't even used that weapon wrapped around your right wrist. Issei said as he continued speaking to his rival and opponent. What are you so afraid of? Why are you still holding back? Do you not acknowledge me as your opponent? Are you afraid of that lazy High Council of Devils and what they will think when you reveal your partner? Or are you more concerned with that limp-dicked fossil with a severe case of erectile dysfunction, going through a middle-age crisis that he likes to cover up by flexing his political muscle and threatening and bending people to his whims to cover up his impotence, Zekrom Baal? Issei stated cheekily, with the silence that permeated the stadium painfully deafening. The spectators couldn't believe what he had just said about the most politically powerful and probably oldest devil alive. The original Great King and the creator of the power of destruction. Ria's eyes widened to comical proportions as she couldn't believe what her pawn had just said. He could get himself executed for saying such things. She was seriously stressing out right now. She needed to get her Oni-sama and make sure nothing happened to Ice. Similar reactions were experienced across the stadium. Some were flabbergasted. Some were afraid for him. The higher-ups on the council were livid. They were almost frothing at the mouth by the disrespect shown to them by some filthy low-class devil. Azazel and Surziches did their best not to fall off their seats in raucous laughter. They'd expect nothing less from their favorite dragon, for him to have the guts to say that on a live broadcast sent throughout the underworld. Indeed, there was never a dull moment with him around. Ihauser Belial, for his part, just smirked to himself and suddenly decided to pay closer attention to this fascinating young man. Seraphil just giggled mischievously at the Issei. She's been wanting to say that for years. Sakurute-chan was a funny guy, not to mention a total hot eye now. A sudden gleam entered her eyes as she seductively licked her lips. Issei, on the field, suddenly felt a chill go down his spine as he could tell he had attracted the gaze of a deadly devil. Grafia raised an elegant eyebrow at the young man, which was the most expression you would get from the ultimate queen. If you looked closely, though, you would see the corners of her lips twitch upwards slightly. Sona sat dumbfounded, her hair comically disheveled and her glasses barely hanging onto her face as she took in what Haidu-kun said. For him to have the audacity to insult and demean one of the most potent devils ever to live in front of so many people, he certainly had a death wish. It was the only explanation. A small treacherous part of her mind gave a little whoop of joy and agreement as Ekrem Bale and his fanatic supporters were the main obstacles in accomplishing her dream. She could picture her sister giggling mischievously at what had just occurred, which caused her to sweat drop. Yes, yes, yes. Fuck you, you old bitch. Haha. Thank you Issei Haidu. Sona shouted in her mind to keep up her appearance and not make a fool of herself. For her part, Ravel just giggled into the back of the hand. She would expect nothing less from Issei-sama, who spoke his mind without care for the consequences and said things as they were. She wasn't afraid for him as she had complete faith that he knew what he was doing. And if any of those stuffy old fossils dare to think they have the right to lay their disgusting hands on her future master, they would have to get through her first. Which won't end well for them or their future mental and physical health. Thought Ravel with a sadistic sparkle in her eyes, which promised unimaginable pain to those she considered enemies that freaked out those sitting around her. Back on the field, Saraerg's eyes were comically bulging out of their sockets, and his jaw was trying to have an intimate encounter with the ground. His mind couldn't process the insanity that was taking place right now. Sure, he had no love for his ancestor. That man was responsible for treating him and his mother like nothing, leading to all their problems. But to hear someone have the nerve to call him out was unimaginable. He felt a little encouraged by the courage shown by Issei. He's lived in the shadow of the Bale house for so long, shedding blood, sweat, and tears to reach this point, but hearing his opponent's words sparked something in him. He was also a bit unnerved that his secret weapon was quickly discovered. I can see the look of shock and concern on your face. You don't need to worry, although it is highly appreciated. I'm not afraid of those idiots. If anything, it's the other way around. They are afraid of me. Issei said with a smirk. Seeing the confusion on his opponent's face, he decided to elaborate. Do you know why I'm still a low-class devil in rank? I can see you wondering where this is going, so let me spell it out for you. I've been a devil for about 7 months. In that time, I defeated a high-class devil in one-on-one combat, even though he underestimated me, and overcame the vaunted immortality of the Phoenix clan. I achieved this in less than 3 weeks of being a devil. I fought and held back Akabiel, a survivor of the Great War. I fought the current hacker Yuku, Volley Lucifer, the strongest host ever, to a stalemate and forced him to retreat at the peace conference. I achieved Balance Breaker in less than a month and defeated the SS-ranked ultimate class Stray Devil Kuroka. I also defeated the traitor Diodora Astereth and the old Mag faction Shalba Beelzebub leader. A few weeks later, with the aid of Saji Genshiro, I defeated the Norse god Loki. Just a few months ago, I fought the leader of the hero faction and the possessor of the true Longinus Cao Cao in Kyoto and forced him to retreat with his tail between his legs while destroying one of his eyes. I know it sounds like I'm bragging, but there is a point to all this. So I'll ask you again, Saraerg Bale, why I'm still a low-class devil. Any of those achievements is enough to earn any devil a promotion test. Going by simple logic, I should be an ultimate class devil right now. Do you know why I'm not? Issei questioned with a knowing smirk on his face. He was going to enjoy this. Saraerg, try as he might, couldn't wrap his head around the argument. He knew what Issei Haidu said was correct. If any of his peers achieved that, they would get automatic promotion. He was brought back by the answer provided by his opponent. An answer he didn't think he would have reached. There only is one answer. Pure unadulterated fear. Issei declared as he explained his reasons. They are afraid of me and what I represent. I'm a commoner. My parents are average working-class citizens with no special attributes in the human world. I'm essentially a nobody, but here I am, standing across from the heir to the powerful House of Bale, trading blows evenly. I represent the faith of the simple men and women who have long been ignored. I represent the hope of the reincarnated devils treated as second-class citizens. They see me rising to the top, giving them the courage to challenge me to do the same and hope their children can have a happy future. Look at those kids sitting in my stand over there. They believe in me. They believe that I will win, and they are rooting for me. This is what they fear. If they promote me, it will show that anything is possible for those of lower rank, and my popularity throughout the underworld will carry that message through. Issei stated passionately as the people in the stands all cheered loudly at his words. They were showing the support behind his message. His words reverberated deeply with them. The people on his side who were more politically inclined, like Xerxes, Azazel, Graphia and Seraphol, realized what he did here. And they couldn't help but tip their hat at the cunning plan he cooked up. By publicly calling out the council on the issues that he did and exposing their unfair treatment of him, he aligned himself with the average devil citizens. These commoners feel similarly aggrieved. Then he fashioned himself as the champion of the commoner and now, without a doubt, garnered their support, which is immense as they are a large majority of the population, but don't have much of a say due to the hierarchy of devil society. But now they had a voice. The powerful and influential devil who wasn't afraid to speak his mind and say it like it is. As it stands, his statements today have the effect of making one of two things happen. Number 1. The High Council agrees to his promotion, which elevates his status, something they were trying to prevent, and validates his message that anything is possible with hard work and determination, which will spur on those of similar class who will look to him as an example. This will also boost his support, as seeing him succeed will give him a significant following from the people he represents and give him some political power due to his sway over the majority population. Or number 2. Is that they continue to deny him his promotion, which will do nothing but validate his claims and show everyone that he was right, and that the council is indeed afraid of him, turning him into a martyr to the people who see him being wronged for no apparent reason. Either way, it's a win-win situation for Isay, regardless of the outcome. The High Council would have little choice, irrespective of their decision. They will lose. It was only a matter of the least damaging choice, as they will take a hit to their reputation regardless of what happens. They will have to work hard to minimize the damage. Those same 4 previously mentioned were seriously impressed. It was such a straightforward maneuver that it seemed ridiculous and suicidal on the surface. Still, in one fell swoop, he established an enormous support base and positioned himself to be a big player in the future. That's why I'm here today, Seraerg. I'm fighting for those kids who don't have a voice. I'm fighting for those people who can't fight for themselves. The question is, what are you fighting for? I could feel the turmoil within you as we exchanged fists. It would help if you put it out of your mind, though. This isn't about Zekrom Bale or Xerxes Lucifer. I don't give a flying fuck about what either of them do. This is about you and me fighting with everything on the line. I acknowledge you as someone worthy of an opponent. We are similar in the way we came about. We were both called failures, which would never amount to anything, and yet we built our bodies, the foundation of our strength, to the point where those same naysayers could never hope to stand against us. We were given nothing, yet we took everything, so I ask you again. Why can I still see you hesitating? Isay asks as he continues, his voice sounding like a war drum for battle. Do you not have someone important you are fighting for? Would she not want you to put the full display of your magnificent power on display with the same body she gifted you? You need to forget about what those idiot politicians say and do what you've always done and speak with your fists. You don't need the power of destruction. Your body is destruction personified. Why hope for a power that can never hope to match your fists? I acknowledge you as the true great king, so show me what you've got. Isay shouted as he spread out his hands and dragon wings. Show me your resolve. This is the fight that these people came to see. The Great King vs. the Red Dragon Emperor. This is about Seraerg Bale vs Isay Haidu. Stop caring about consequences and let's tear this place down. Isay shouted to the roaring and thunderous cheers of the spectators. Seraerg, for his part, felt a huge burden was lifted off his shoulders. His opponent, Isay Haidu, was right. He made it this far by obliterating any obstacles that stood in his way without fear of anything. The thought of his beloved mother and the sacrifices she had made for him echoed through his mind. His eyes became a little misty as he thought of her and decided she would want him to live freely without being bogged down by silly politics. If he loses support today, he will build it up again from the bottom. His resolve hardened as he finally felt free of the metaphorical shackles he had placed on himself. He decided it was time to honor his mother and her clan. Isay Haidu, your words have resonated with my soul. I feel freer than I have been in a long time. I will reward you with my full power. Prepare yourself. Seraerg declared as he spoke to his partner. Regulus. Are you ready? I'm always prepared to aid you, my master. Seraerg held up his left arm as his golden bracelet shone brightly with a golden light. Most people curiously looked on, wondering what he was doing. Azazel had his eyebrows disappear into his hairline as he recognized the jewel on the bracelet. Balance breaker. A dazzling light spread around the field. Because of its intense light, most of the audience covered their eyes, but when the light vanished, what appeared was Seraerg wearing a golden-colored plate armor, which had a lion motif. The helm on its head had golden hair, which looked like that of a lion. There was a lion-like face on its chest, and the eyes on it glowed as if it had its consciousness. The concussive force of the release of power destroyed the ground around him. The balance breaker of the Regulus Nemia, the Regulus Ray Leather Rex. Isay Haidu. I thank you from the bottom of my heart for making me serious. That's why I will reward you with my fist. Come at me with all you've got. Saraerg, walking towards Issei step by step, says that out loud. An overwhelming presence surrounded him, and his armor was covered in tauki. In the commentator box, Azazel was frothing at the mouth, seeing a Longinus class sacred gear that had been missing for years. He had many questions that needed to be answered. He didn't doubt that things would get prickly for the House of Baal for hiding a Longinus sacred gear from the leaders, especially with the peace treaty. Seeing the power roll off Saraerg, Issei laughed happily to himself. He was definitely becoming a battle maniac like a certain knuckle-headed dragon slayer from fairy tale. Marvelous. You are the real deal, Saraerg. You have my respect. Let me show it to you the only way I know how. I honestly wasn't planning on using my balance breaker in this fight, but consider this a show of respect I have towards you, so you better hold on to your head. Issei said as he flew up straight into the air. As he reached the highest point he could, he spread his arms out and shouted. Balance breaker. An oppressive force weighed down on all those present as a blinding red light encompassed the arena. Some of the audience's more vulnerable members were having difficulty breathing. As quickly as the pressure appeared, it was lifted as all the released red light merged into a single point where ice was in the air, forming a large spinning ball of red energy encompassing him. If you need a visual, think of the scene in Bleach when Hisagi Shuhei released Kazushimi in the fake Karakura town against Finder. The energy kept churning until something cut it in half before expelling it to reveal the sight within. It was awe-inspiring, which was what most of the audience felt. The gleaming red armor of the Red Dragon Emperor was on full display for all to see. But it wasn't the regular armor they were accustomed to seeing. This one looked a lot more streamlined and offered more mobility. It was also more aesthetically pleasing. The armor had changed into a mix between his balance breaker and a king's armor. Most of the armor was still dragon-looking parts, mainly on the feet and helmet, which became more human-fitting, but the top of the helmet became more like a crown, and his armor's wings disappeared and turned into a blood-red cape. The armor's chest area became a bit more body-fit, but the audience could see that it was now made of a new material, which showed it was tough, light, and smooth. His gauntlets were red, but they became less thick and became slim. The jewels were the same, as were the eyes of the helmet. Once again, Azazel was practically salivating at the sight of what he assumed to be a subspecies balance breaker. He seriously needed to get that boy in his lab. The Op-Eyed Dragon fan area was going wild with cheers seeing their hero in his armor. It differed from the one they were used to seeing on TV, but looked way more relaxed. Ravel led them in their cheers as she smiled beautifully at seeing her idol in his armor. Let's do this, Saraerg. Roared Ice as the two of them charged each other. Start song. Standing here I realize. They met in the middle as their fists met in a clash that shook the foundations of the arena and sent shockwaves through the air. They disengaged and dove in once more for another decisive blow. On and on they went, trying to overpower the other. Fists and feet were flying as they fought for dominance. The audience, at the stadium and home, was completely engrossed in the fight and the emotion that both fighters gave off. Blood started flying from the blow's concussive impact as more hits connected. It was now a battle of stamina and willpower. All fancy tricks and elegance were thrown out the window. It was about who could outlast the other. More and more hits landed as the dull impacting sounds reverberated throughout the arena. Bones could be heard creaking from the power of the clashes. People started to either move to the edge of their seats or stand as they could sense the end approaching. The Orc and Riaz watched in shock as Issei fought and spoke like a completely different person throughout the match. If it weren't for the sacred gear he was using, they would think he was an impostor. His strength now far outstripped anything they could ever hope to put up. It was indeed an eye-opening experience. Azazel watched proudly as the weak little boy he knew became a fine man. He wondered if this was what proud fathers felt like, especially after he enjoyed catching up with Vali and seeing the fantastic weapons, skills, and gadgets the White Dragon Emperor had obtained in that other world. Ravel looked on with a gentle smile on her face as Issei Sama fought his heart out. Seeing him now reiterated to her that she made the right choice in choosing him. She slowly put her hands together in prayer, a devil praying. The irony was not lost on her for Issei Sama's win, for she had complete and unshakable faith in him. The two competitors were staggering as they dug into the tank for their last attack. As Saraerg moved in with a brutal-looking punch, Issei activated his dragon-slaying magic. Fire Dragon King's Destruction Fist. Saraerg was too drained to get out of the way as he saw the attack coming. You win today, Haidu Issei. Thank you for a marvelous fight and for showing me the light again. Those were Saraerg's last thoughts as Issei's attack connected with his sternum, knocking him out. As Saraerg's back hit the ground, his armor dissipated. Silence. Then song here. Issei released his balance breaker before walking over to Saraerg, bending down and placing a fist on his chest in gratitude. Saraerg Baal loses. He retires. This is the end of the game. Ria's Gremory team's victory, announced Rudiger Rosenkreutz. It is over. Issei Haidu defeated Saraert Bale. The Gremory team wins. Nod shouted, and the entire stadium burst into cheers in appreciation of the spectacular fight they had witnessed. Ria shed a few happy tears at her peerage's victory and her beloved pawns coming through for her. The rest of her peerage was happily celebrating in the medical ward. Sona Sitri shook her head in disbelief. Her queen was of a similar state of mind. To think that the infamous pervert of Kuo defeated the most potent youth devil. Sona needed to review this match again in her spare time to analyze the strategies. One thing was for sure, though, she needed to keep an eye on Haidu-kun in the future. She suddenly blushed as some less than savory thoughts filled her mind. Luckily, no one but her queen noticed as her peers were busy cheering their schoolmates on. Bravel was happy to see her Issei Sama finally get the recognition he deserved. She hoped this led to his promotion, as she couldn't wait to stand by his side permanently, where she belonged. As Issei took in the crowd's cheers, he turned toward the fan section of his show, where the children were situated. He smiled gently at them as they enthusiastically cheered for him. He raised his hand as a large magic circle appeared about the stand. From it fell out a multitude of Op-Eye Dragon merchandise, including shirts, caps, and balance breaker plushies, all signed by him. The stadium erupted in cheers as they saw his gesture toward the children who idolized him. It reverberated with them, especially those of common birth and those who were reincarnated. At that moment, in their hearts, they dubbed him their champion. Issei raised his arm in victory as his name thundered across the arena. Issei. 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 It felt good to him. The recognition of his deeds and the acknowledgement of his strength. He backed in their adulation a little longer as a single thought rang through his mind. This is just the beginning. Issei said as he thanked Fairy Tail, Drake, Volley, and his enemies in that other world who helped him get to where he is now. And now that the battle was over, it was time for the celebration. Later. The atmosphere was celebratory in the infirmary, housing the remaining members of the Gremory peerage as they celebrated their victory in a grueling and hard-fought raiding game. Although they had a previous triumph against Sona Sitri, it couldn't be a satisfying win. This one gave them all a feeling of pride and accomplishment, defeating the most potent youth devil to put them on many people's radar. They were joined by their King Rias, Bishop Asia, Angel Arena, and the Phoenix Princess Ravel. Rias was in tears as she congratulated and thanked her servants for fighting so hard on her behalf. Has anyone seen Issei? Zenobia asked with a tilt of her head. Her question elicited many emotions from the room's occupants, mostly positive. They were all waiting with bated breath to see their friend again. He made a stop at the other infirmary. He should be here in a few minutes, Azazel answered as he stepped into the room, followed by Surzich's, Grafia, and little Milica's. Rias won Isama. Congratulations on winning. He cheered Milica's with an adorable smile, making many girls coo at his cuteness. Ria-tan. Ani-chan is so proud of you. Surzich said with manly tears running down his face as he made to glomp his sister, before the ever-reliable Grafia intercepted him by way of a hand to his ears, followed by a painful twist. Surzich's Sama, you are the Mao Lucifer. Please show proper etiquette. Grafia said with a long, suffering sigh accompanied by the shrieks of pain from Surzich's, which made the members of the Orc chuckle uncomfortably. Seems like you guys are having fun in here, Issei said as he walked into the room, accompanied by the atomic blushes of the females, including Grafia, although she had more control. He still had the same pants and boots from earlier, but now swapped out the combat vest for a white button-up shirt with the top button undone, giving them a glimpse of a delicious neckline adorned by his dragon fang necklace. Over the shirt, he wore a black leather jacket that extended to his knees with whitish-gray fur along the collar, Squall Leonhardt's jacket from Final Fantasy VE, except it spread to the knees. All in all, he exuded the aura of a terrific bad boy, which a particular lightning dragon user influenced. Rias immediately cried, as all the emotions she'd been bottling up these last few months came rushing back as she barreled towards him in a hug. As she cried into his chest, apologizing for what happened and asking for forgiveness, Issei smiled and patted her on the shoulder. Rias, it's fine. I'm not pissed off, nor am I holding a grudge. Issei said as he took out a handkerchief and cleaned her eyes. Rias gasped before asking. Really, but I thought you'd hate you for that day and held a grudge against you and the others. Issei asked as Rias nodded before Issei sighed and sat Rias on a chair before he snapped his fingers as Virgo appeared behind him and got on her hands and knees before Issei sat on her, making Virgo blush as she was happy with this gesture from her master. Libra showed up as well as she began to sit envelop Issei's head as she pressed his head into her bust, causing the men to be amused by this, while the girls were a bit annoyed by this, until Issei then began to speak. Thank you Virgo. You make a wonderful chair, and if you fall, I'll punish you tonight. Issei said as Virgo blushed and thanked Issei for giving her such love, which made Azazel snicker as he realized what Vali meant when he told him about Issei's new familiars. Oh, and thanks for the boob pillow, Libra. I always enjoy the performances you put on. Libra smiled as she then leaned into his ear and whispered something too quiet for them all to hear. Issei began to chuckle before groping her left bust, causing Libra to smile and let out a long, satisfied sigh. I'd love to see your show later, but for now, it's time for business. Pleasure comes later to those who wait, Issei said. Libra smiled and nodded, then leaned forward and pressed more of his head into her bust. Bekendo blushed and licked her lips behind her sleeve as she was getting turned on by this, while seeing that Issei was also giving Virgo love and punishing her. Which made her masochistic side want to take the maid's place and enjoy the feeling of Issei on her back. Ravel looked and saw Libra look directly at her, before the constellation nodded her head as she then began to massage Issei's scalp. Issei enjoyed it as he then looked at the others and explained his feelings towards the orc. Now look, I wasn't exactly happy when you called me an idiot and then the barrage of insults came, but I expected you to understand my pain at least, since I was there for all of your troubles and helped you, and yet you never once asked me how I felt or about my feelings. Granted, I was mad for the first month. Still, after the second and third months, I began to understand that it was also my fault that I didn't tell you all that Rainer affected me so much. Still, thanks to Vali, Drake, and a few other friends I made along the way, I could move on and let my heart be healed by friends who were there for me at my lowest moments and helped me get back on my feet. Issei said as he recalled the friends and loved ones he had made at Edenland and Fairy Tale, before Issei got up from Virgo, Libra letting him go early before he stood up and walked towards Ria's before flicking her forehead. Ow. There. That's my anger released. Issei said as Rias held her forehead in hopes of healing it, but could also tell that Issei didn't have any anger towards them, which made relief fill the orc members' hearts as he said those words. They thought things could finally go back to normal. That is until they noticed that Issei wasn't drooling over Rias like he usually does or making inappropriate remarks about breasts. If anything, he looked impassive in her presence. Now granted that I forgive you all, but that doesn't mean this, Issei said as he gestured to himself and the girls as he continued. Our relationship is on a sheet of thin ice. I want to give you all another chance, but I don't know if I can ever feel the same way I did. I care about you all, and I swear I'll protect you from harm, but as far as our relationships go, I wouldn't say we're a couple, which is why I want to rebuild our relationship. I still cherish the memories I made with all of you, and I don't want to lose that, even when I become a king. I still want to see you all achieve your dreams and desires, so I'll help you, but if you want to restore our relationship, you must make the first move. I'll be open to speaking to you about anything and even going on dates with you, but what happens between us is up to you, girls. This made the girls who heard Issei feel some relief, as they were happy to be given a second chance to see Issei and restore their relationship once again, so they knew they didn't want to screw it up a second time. Surzichas, Grafia-san and of course little Milikas. It's so good to see you again. Issei said politely toward Surzichas and Grafia before patting Milika's head, making the little boy go into a temporary state of bliss. The former smiled as he put his arm around Issei's shoulder, while his wife politely greeted Ice back. Good evening, Ice-sama. Congratulations on a magnificently fraught battle. Grafia said as Issei blushed lightly at the praise from someone he held in high regard. Thanks, Grafia-san, that means a lot coming from you. Seriously, Issei, that fight was for the ages, not to mention your little speech in the middle. Do you know what kind of stir it caused among the higher-ups? Surzichas said as Issei raised a brow and replied. Stir? I don't know what you mean. I just spoke my mind like I always do. I thought people were used to that part of me. Issei replied with a sly smile and eyes shining with mischief, making Azazel and Surzichas burst out laughing. It's safe to say that your little training retreat paid dividends, Azazel said, and Issei nodded in agreement. Yeah, it did. I feel better than I ever have in my life. Plus, I learned a whole lot about the supernatural world as well. The boosted gear is a well of information if you know where to look. Issei replied with a subtle wink to Azazel, who caught on quickly to his meaning. Ice-sama, you were so cool out there. Milika said with stars shining in his eyes as he gazed at Issei with adoration, making Surzichas crouch in the corner with a storm cloud over his head as he drew shapes into the ground with his finger while saying how Issei was stealing his son away. Making everyone in the room sweat drop at the powerful Mayu while Grafia's eyebrow was twitching irritably. Issei ignored the drama, picked up little Milika's, and put him on his shoulder. He then regaled him with tales of his astonishing victories, making the little boy gush with excitement. The girls in the room cooed at the adorable scene. Grafia just smiled softly, seeing two of her favorite boys get along. She would never say it out loud, but she had a bit of a soft spot for Issei. He was like a goofy little brother you couldn't help but love. You cut it pretty close today. You're normally pretty punctual, so why were you late? Azazel asked curiously before Issei sheepishly scratched his head as he responded. Yeah, well, I was training. I erected a powerful barrier spell to contain any damage I caused. A few hours before the match, I released it. But as soon as I released it, I found someone waiting for me on the other side. Issei said he didn't lie, but didn't tell them the truth. For now, they didn't need to know about the time dilation field. The others were surprised that he could use barrier magic, as it wasn't familiar to them. Their surprise suddenly turned to alarm at the prospect of someone lying in wait for ice. Was it the Chaos Brigade? Surziches asked. His earlier good mood vanished, and he was in full leader mode. Issei just shook his head negatively. No. I doubt it, and if anything, it was the old Mag faction. I took care of the problem, though, so there's no need to worry. Issei said assuringly. The adults in the room could sense that he didn't give them the entire story, but they knew they would get it later in a more private location, when he signaled them with his eyes. Once the worry passed, things returned to normal with a boisterous conversation between Surziches and Azazel. Issei went over to Gasper and praised him for his bravery, making the damper sob in happiness at his senpai's praise. The others got a word or two of congratulations as they were happy to have Issei back into their lives, hoping to rekindle and restore the relationship they destroyed because of their selfishness. As the festivities continued, Issei walked over to his manager, who sat at the corner of the room. Her face lit up in joy at seeing his, which she quickly tried to mask with a facade of indifference. Issei just chuckled at the tsundere tendencies of his beautiful blonde manager. Hey Ravel, good work today, not only in the stands, but for organizing everything just as I asked. It turned out better than I imagined, thanks to your dedication. I'm proud to call you my manager. Issei commended with a warm and kind smile as he patted the head of Ravel, whose face ignited in an atomic blush, along with the most blissfully happy expression on her face at the praise from the man she loved. It was like her greatest dreams had come true. There were even tears at the corner of her eyes as she basked in the presence and adoration of her beloved. Anything for you, Issei-sama, Ravel said, still lost in the sensation of the praise and head patting from Issei, who just chuckled wryly at the somewhat childish behavior from the resident Oju-sama. Issei then led Ravel towards a more private area. After making sure they were alone and no one was around, Issei spoke to Ravel. Ravel Phoenix. I know I've been gone for so long, and in that time, I realized how much you meant to me, and that you had feelings for me. Still, I was worried you'd hate me too because of my past with Rainer, and I know this may seem like I'm rushing this, but one thing I learned in my training was that life is too short and I don't want to have any regrets. Issei said as he got on one knee, making Ravel gasp at the motion before Issei reached into the inside of his jacket and presented a silver ring with a beautiful dark blue gem the same shade as Ravel's eyes. Issei. Is this Ravel asked as Issei nodded, held out the ring, and asked the question that Ravel had been waiting for so long. Yes, Ravel Phoenix. Would you marry me? Issei asked. Ravel was shocked by the question before crying joyful tears and nodding. Yes. What took you so long to ask me? Ravel said as Issei slipped the ring on her finger before kissing under the moonlight, while Azazel blew his nose from the romantic scene. I'm so proud of myself. I raised him well, Azazel said as he tried to stop the tears while Surziches cried before hugging the fallen governor. Grafia smiled at the scene. She was happy to see that the one she saw as a little brother proposed to the girl who stood by his side and loved him for who he was. Grafia also hoped to be invited to the future wedding, while Riser, Ruvel, and Lord Phoenix were crying tears of joy as they were happy for the young girl. At the same time, Lady Phoenix smiled and mentally cheered for her daughter, getting ahead of the other girls and making her move. Unfortunately, things weren't going to be so peaceful, thanks to the cow's bride seeing the matchup, so Cao Cao turned to a book of dark magic he had found when exploring different types of magic to assist them. This led Cao Cao to find the book he was looking for, thanks to the help of his second-in-command, Georg. Georg had heard of a book being sealed away by a powerful mage who had mastered dark magic and used that magic to create many sorts of demon-banned magic that were even on par with a god, such as time freezing. Knowing that he and his army needed the power of said magic to give them a fighting chance, Zeref spoke to Hades and asked him to lend him the book after learning that Hades himself had kept the book within the land of the dead the whole time due to the caster, asking the god of death to keep the book out of the hands of those who would dare abuse it. However, Hades allowed Cao Cao to wager his life to obtain the book since there were others who desired the powers of said book. Still, in the end, they all fell and died in Hades' realm. This brings us to now, as Cao Cao is panting heavily on the ground, lying in a puddle of his blood that would have killed a normal person. But Cao Cao gritted his teeth as he slowly got back to his feet to see a simple black book written in an unknown language, glowing a dark purple aura, until the book shouted at Cao Cao. You claim to be a hero and wield my power. You are nothing but a fool who thinks he can play God because you hide behind the mask you put on to cover your sins. It doesn't matter. You can try all your tricks, but I will be the one who brings humanity back their freedom from the supernatural world, and I will sacrifice everything to save humanity. Even becoming a demon if I must. So you would sacrifice everything to obtain my power? That's right. Your heart? Yes. Your soul? Yes. Even your humanity to become a demon? That's right. The shout echoed through the land of the dead, and all was silent at that moment before the book began to laugh. Its pages began to fly out of its cover and surround the hero, before a figure began to form in front of Cao Cao. The being was a tall, lean young man with dark purple hair that was long and wavy, reaching his shoulders, even while the majority was tied up in a very large ponytail. Additionally, his messy bangs all but obscure his dark, slanted eyes. For clothing, the man before him donned a long black jacket trimmed with a light-colored flame pattern. The lapels were a matching lighter color as well. The cuffs of his jacket are rolled up, revealing a light-colored inside, which contrasts the black outside of his jacket and has a black line cutting through the edge of the fabric. The jacket itself is tattered and splits into 4 torn fabric segments at the tail. Beneath the jacket, he wears a frilly black V-necked shirt, lined in a lighter color, that closes down the middle and is adorned with a buckle just below his clavicle. Just below this is a piece of fabric that he keeps over this shirt, but under his jacket, that circles the majority of the lower half of his torso. The rest of his attire is simple, consisting of light-colored pants that lay lazily over the top of rather plain black boots and have, on each leg, a seam running down the middle, as well as 2 pairs of buckles that form an X on the thigh and lower calf. However, the buckles on each thigh later disappear, leaving only the ones on each calf. Well then, allow me to introduce myself. I am Margir, but you may call me Tartaros, and if you truly are willing to sacrifice everything for humanity, then I must test you to see how far you really are willing to go. Tartaros said as Cao Cao saw dark magic leave the pages as they positioned themselves to spear Cao Cao. The leader of the hero faction merely stabbed his spear into the ground and held his hands out. Let's begin, Cao Cao said. Tartaros smiled as he snapped his fingers, causing the power to stab Cao Cao and enter his whole body. Cao Cao bit his tongue to prevent himself from yelling as he felt his body being reborn under the magic's influence. This led to Tartaros smiling as he patted the boy's head. Do not worry, Cao Cao, now that you have me, nothing will stand in our way. We will save humanity and bring destruction to all of our enemies. Tartaros said as Cao Cao smiled and nodded as he was feeling something new inside of his being. Cao Cao feels that he's becoming a real god, one that shall smite all who stand in his way. Cao Cao, the leader of the hero faction, is no more. Now, the leader has become the supreme king of humanity. Now, you are ready to become the savior of humanity, so tell me, are you ready to wreak havoc on your enemies? Tartaros asked as Cao Cao smiled with a wide grin before replying to his partner. Yes, but I do not wish to be Cao Cao anymore. Cao Cao was a fool, and so I wish to be reborn with a new name. Call me Angsarum. The newly named Angsarum said as Tartaros smiled at his partner's new name. How fitting. That's it guys. Thanks for watching and supporting us. See you in the next part.